don't own a bolt-action rifle where you can remove your bolt and look down your bore, there are many tools and accessories that'll help you zero out your scope. There are wand-type laser bore sighters that you insert in your muzzle. There are magnetic laser bore sighters that you hang from your muzzle or crown, to an in-chamber laser bore sighter that is shaped like a bullet cartridge. But this is a bore sighter that doesn't use a laser or batteries. This is a traditional optical bore sighter from Xaegis. Okay, we have our Xaegis Boresighter Kit here, and in the realm of high-end cases for products, I have to say this is definitely on the low end. It's really cheap feeling, very thin, but it is a plastic case and it'll keep all of your kit together. So let's see what you get inside. We have a full featured Boresighter kit, and we have our instruction manual here. Well, I would barely call it an instruction sheet, and also feels like a cheap laser printer printout here, or photocopy. Definitely read your instruction manual before using your product, but TLDR, I will be showing you how to use this Boresighter kit in this video, so let's skip ahead here. We have our Boresighter lens unit here, and this is the meat of the product, because you will be using this to boresight your scope. And it's a two-lens system here with an etched lens in the back, and you'll be looking through this with your scope. And you can kind of see it here, not very clearly, but we'll see it through the scope at the range. But at the back there, there's an etched grid, and you'll be using that to line up your scope reticle. And you'll be mounting this to the front of your barrel, and you'll be using one of these adapters, arbors or mandrels, or I don't know what the technical term is. If you're a machinist or a mechanic, please let me know if I'm using those terms incorrectly, but I believe they're called arbors, or sometimes mandrels, or just simply stems, adapters. It goes from 0.177 or 17 HMR all the way up to 50 cal, and even includes a shotgun adapter here. And this one expands to either 20 gauge or 12 gauge, so that widens up there. And these fit inside of your bore, and it also attaches to your optical unit here. And I'll show you. I'm going to just grab one of these, 6.5. So for those of you Creedmoor fans, you just unscrew that bolt there. You find the flat of your adapter stem, and you just place it in there. Align it to the flat, and screw it down so that it's aligned properly on the flat. And this brass spring here is what gives you the tension as you insert this into your barrel, your bore. It'll hold this in place using the tension of that brass spring, and you'll just align this to your reticle, to the level, and that's assuming your scope is level, which you should always do when you're mounting it, then you'll be able to see the grid there properly. So as you can see here though, this is as high as it's going to go. So if you can imagine your barrel's here, your scope shouldn't be that much higher, probably about at the most 2-3 inches higher. So that is a limitation of this particular design. But in my experience, this kind of optical boresighters are in general easier to use, more reliable than laser boresighters. But we'll see that at the range. So let's get out to the range and give this a good thorough test. All right, we are at the range to test out this Boresighter kit. And I've brought out my Ruger 1022 takedown with a Sniper VT scope as our test bed. Now, in general, because of the physical limitations of the Boresighter lens here, you're going to be sticking this inside of your bore, but because of just the height of this particular lens kit, you're not going to be able to use this for any setup where your scope is higher than, say, 2 inches above bore, just because you won't be able to see this very well. So if you have a high scope riser set up like on an AR, you won't be able to see this. So generally this is better used for low rings and without any high Picatinny mounts. So that is a limitation, the physical limitations of this particular kit. So the first thing you want to do is you want to point your scope to a fairly light or plain background, just so you don't have a lot of clutter, visual clutter, because you're going to be putting the Boresighter lens on front of it, and it has that grid, so you want a fairly plain background to look through. Also, you want to make sure that your scope is leveled prior to use, just to make things easier. Make sure that your scope is level. So first things first, we're going to be putting the appropriately sized mandrel adapter. This is at 22, so we're going to be putting the 22 in here, and just tighten that down and make sure that it lands on the flat. And then we're just going to stick it into our bore. Don't worry if it's not exact yet. We'll be looking through our grid here and just seeing it's all lined up. Now, notice here, I've got it at its lowest power setting of 4, and you can see immediately here at its lowest power setting that, yeah, this setup is even just too high for this particular Boresighter device. But just because of the weirdness of optics, if you crank up your magnification, actually, you can now start seeing the grid. So I've got it at 10 power currently, and it's pretty sharp. Let me just adjust this. And as you can see, I've got it aligned. I just happen to have it aligned to the horizon, just blacked out there. But if it's not, you can always adjust it and just rotate it till it is aligned. And let me just fix that. When I fix that, my adjustment threw that off. No. There we go. And as you can see, actually, we are pretty much centered on that grid. Just, well, not surprising since I had this scope already zeroed out. But we got to see if it actually works. So what I'm going to do is I am going to pop these turrets, and I'm just going to scramble them so that we're no longer zeroed out. All right, so we're going to start over again. So assume that we've inserted our adapter into the scope, and you want to, let's just simulate that. I'm going to put it back in there, and it's not even aligned properly, so we're going to rotate it so that it is aligned. So yeah, roughly aligned. So what you'll see is this grid, and what you want to do is adjust your turrets so that your reticle aligns to the center part of that grid. There we go. So to test it, I aimed for the center dot on a paper target at 100 yards, and my 3 shots landed on the bottom left corner of the paper, which is perfectly fine because I was able to adjust my reticle to move it over to those 3 impact points, and then take subsequent shots to see if my point of impact matches my reticle. Okay, now that a ceasefire is called on the range, we're able to walk down to the target and see how well we've zeroed out our scope. And while we're doing that, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you've been enjoying this video thus far, if you've gotten some good info from it, I'd really appreciate it. And when you've hit that subscribe button, which is free by the way, you're more likely to see my new videos when I post them in the future. And if you hit that bell button, you'll be notified when I post my next video. You can see my initial 3 shots that I got from the optical Boresighter at the bottom left of the paper. And then adjusting the reticle from those 3 reference holes, I was quickly able to get the scope zeroed out. And the rest of these holes are just plinking, having fun. Now, some of you may be asking, why did my initial shots land to the bottom left of the bullseye and not on the bullseye if I aligned the reticle to the center of the grid? You gotta remember, every gun is different, every ammo is different. There's different bullet weights, bullet shapes, different loadings, all different ballistics. This tool doesn't know whether or not you're shooting 22 or 300 Win Mag. My point is, a Boresighter is really there to get you into the general area of your bullseye, and from your impact points, you'll be able to zero out your scope. And don't forget to make use of that grid and make note of where your initial impacts are. If I were to zero out a different scope on this rifle, I would simply align my reticle of that scope to a different grid coordinate rather than the smack dab center of that grid. Well, as you saw, the Boresighter Kit did work. It got me on paper at 100 yards and helped me get my rifle and scope zeroed out. And if you're interested in picking one up, you can find more product information on my blog, moondogindustries.com. Thanks again for watching. Moondog, out. Hey, I'd like to know what you thought of this video. Leave me a comment or chat with me on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, MeWe, Instagram, or Locals. And if you want to see all of my videos, go to moondogindustries.com.